How did a painfully shy, repressed kid from a ridiculously strict religious family transform into the silk pajama-wearing, mansion-dwelling king of the 20th century? This isn't a story about luck. It's the story of a guy who got so fed up with his boring life, he literally glued together an empire on his kitchen table. To understand the Playboy, you have to meet the boy who literally wasn't allowed to play. Hugh Marston Hefner was born in Chicago in 1926 to strict Methodist parents. In the Hefner household, affection was basically illegal. No drinking, no swearing, no pop culture, and definitely no talking about, well, you know. Young Hugh felt like he was living in a black and white movie while the rest of the world was in Technicolor. Fast forward a bit. Hugh serves in the army during World War II, where he ironically draws cartoons for the military newspaper instead of fighting on the front lines. He goes to college, gets a degree in psychology, and lands what seems like a dream job: a copywriter for Esquire magazine. But Esquire decides to move their offices from Chicago to New York. Hugh tells his boss, "Sure, I'll move, but I want a $5 raise." They said no. Over $5 measly. In today's money, that's like $50. But for Hugh, it was the principle of the thing. He quit. That $5 insult was the spark. Hugh realized that if he wanted the life he'd dreamed about in his gray childhood bedroom, he was going to have to build it himself. He didn't just want to write for a men's magazine. He wanted to reinvent what a men's magazine was. Here is where the legend actually begins. Hugh didn't have an office. He didn't have staff. He had a kitchen table, a typewriter, and a desperate need for cash. He needed $8,000 to print his first issue. He pitched everyone he knew. He even went to his strict conservative mother, and guess what? She gave him $1,000. Not because she believed in a magazine about parties and girls, but, as she later said, because she believed in her son. But a magazine needs a hook, and Hugh found the ultimate hook. For $500, he bought the publishing rights to a set of nude calendar photos of a rising, relatively unknown actress named Marilyn Monroe. Originally, he was going to call the magazine Stag Party, but a rival magazine threatened to sue him. So, scrambling for a new name, a friend suggested the name of a defunct car company in Chicago, Playboy. December 1953. The first issue hits the stands. If you look closely at that legendary first cover, you'll notice something missing. There's no date. Why? Because Hugh was absolutely terrified it was going to flop. He didn't put a date on it because he had zero clue if there would ever be a second issue. He shouldn't have worried. It sold over 50,000 copies practically overnight. The gamble paid off. Hugh Hefner wasn't just a publisher now, he was a cultural phenomenon. But here's the true genius of Hugh Hefner. He realized early on that he couldn't just sell paper and pictures, he had to sell a lifestyle. The Playboy wasn't just about beautiful women, it was about jazz, expensive stereo equipment, fine cocktails, and highbrow literature. He published Ray Bradbury, Ian Fleming, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And to sell that lifestyle, Hugh had to become its mascot, the ultimate Playboy. He needed a uniform. The funny thing is, the iconic silk pajamas and smoking jacket, they didn't start as a fashion statement. In the early days, Hugh was working 24/7 from his apartment. He just never had time to put on real clothes. When executives came over for meetings, he'd answer the door in his PJs. Instead of looking unprofessional, it looked powerful. It said, "I make the rules. Welcome to my world." He leaned into the persona, bought a mansion, and threw the parties he had only dreamed about as a repressed kid in Chicago. From a zero-fun childhood to the most famous bachelor pad in human history, Hugh Hefner didn't just stumble into success. He took his own feelings of being an outsider, wrapped them in a silk smoking jacket, and sold a fantasy to millions of men who felt the exact same way. And to think, it all happened because a boss wouldn't give him a $5 raise. If you want to hear more insane stories about how the biggest empires in the world were built, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and tell us in the comments who we should cover next. See you next time.